the systems, and such as pharma industry is also knowledge-based industry. The data volatility, that means what we had last 15 years before for the treatment of, the hypertension or diabetes mellitus or myocardial infarct. We have the treatment strategies and, in terms of both therapeutic interventions and as well as surgical interventions were very different today. That means the way the bypass surgery has been conducted 20, 25 years before is the procedures are altogether different. So it's a very volatile industry. And it's a technology-driven industry. See, these are all the very two important things. The revenue or the realization comes from the, to say, technology. If you have a very good technology, you can make a lot of money into that. But the same time, your technology is at very high risk because the volatility of the technology. So the data handling, especially in pharma research and manufacturing, is very important because of high volatility, because you invest somewhere around $1 billion to come up with one of the NCE, whereas in 1.2 to 1.5 billion dollars to come up with one new biological entity. Suppose if at all your product is not performing well in market, probably you not only lost the money of 1.5 billion dollars, but also you lost the 12 to 14 years of development. This is what to say the innovator company's thought process or scenario. But whereas if we come back to in India, the generic business in India is, highly rationalized because of a number of factors. One such a factor is that the competition is very high, and because of the stringent FDA stringent regulatory measures in accordance to the CGMP. So based on this context, what I mean to say is that the data is very important. The data of the pharma has three basic pillars. One is you are creating the scientific evidence. For example, what you see in a patient information leaflet or FDA label, the FDA label is itself a technical document and as well as a regulatory document. Moreover, it's a legal document. So here, the data is not only related to technical aspect and also the legal aspect. So it's a kind of techno-legal data what we are generating. Suppose somebody or some companies, doing some different practices in handling the data in two ways. One is unknowingly presenting the data in different formats, or knowingly, intentionally putting into the different formats is a criminal offense. So the scientific evidence and legal aspects. And the third is data dynamics and volatility, which is very, very important because the chemistry, in fact, manufacturing, engineering aspect and clinical aspects has revolved in a kind of a very different, it has a lot of volatility. And the third thing which we see that large number of data, volume of data, it's a clinical R&D, marketing, so on. So it's a very complex thing, to know about the pharmaceutical data analytics. Next slide, please. So what is the data science? It's a kind of textbook message dealing with unstructured and structured data. The reason why I put structured and unstructured data is, suppose if at all if you are developing if your lab notebook, if you take, it's a kind of unstructured data because that is the raw data. The raw data which is available, you may be, you yourself generating through some of the scientific and experimentation. And also what you are doing is that you are taking from the number of literatures, you are digging the literatures and you are keep on building the, the confidence for the data which you are generating. So the data science per se is but dealing with the unstructured data and structured data. The unstructured data is the raw data, unprocessed data, the data which is available in public domain or knowledge domain, which is scattered in different formats. The different formats may be a primary, secondary, and tertiary data, or maybe a different formats, some kind of hidden patents, patent or hidden information is there. So you have to dig and search. So the data science is dealing with both unstructured and structured data. So it involves the statistics and mathematics. Probably we use mathematical probability, we use statistical probability, and we use a lot of mathematical algorithm to develop the relationship between the variables and response and so on. And it requires some kind of programming. You require programming and problem solving, because when you are doing a root cause analysis, it's a kind of problem solving methodology. Capturing the data in indigenous way, that means the way you are capturing the data is also one of the very interesting and very important thing. The ability to look the data at things differently, this is what very important. As a subject matter expert, as a domain expert, you should always look the data in a differently. That means you can see as a subject matter expert what is the message the data is giving, and how can I use the data for statistical decision making to augment my business opportunity. Then it also involved cleansing the data, preparing, stacking, bootstrapping. The number of methodologies are available. The cleansing part, when we are talking, like, we can use some kind of numerical outlier analysis. Number of steps are there. We will discuss if time permits. So this is what the in crux, the data science is dealing with the structured and unstructured data. With the help of mathematics, statistics, programming, problem solving, and logical sequencing, and so on. Next slide, please. The data mining is very interesting. Probably those who are doing their masters and research programs, some of the professors, those who are doing hardcore research, they may be knowing these data mining techniques. That means the process of digging the data to discover the hidden connections and predicting the future trends. This is what generally we used to do when we are developing a kind of drug discovery chemistry, or developing a hardcore formulation development. For example, one such a thing is that when the people come up with the liposomal doxorubicin, it is the ability to deliver the doxorubicin which will give the enhanced permeation and retention. Somehow the people understand the the clearance of the doxorubicin, especially pegylated doxorubicin, although it's a hydrophilic the surface, the clearance. Then they made a kind of reduce the myocardial toxicity. So these are all the extension of the product extension of the data mining. That means you are understanding much better way. For example, that the product is causing the myocardial toxicity. The more you make pegylation, you can minimize the the accumulation of the drug in myocytes, and hence you can prevent the myocardial toxicity. Something, this is what which is the part and partial of every research. For example, you take the the development of Taxol, or you take the development of potassium chloride extended release tablet. Everything is nothing but it's you're revealing and exploring what is the hidden patent in terms of physiology, pathophysiology, or clinical benefits, something like that. So the data mining is very important for any scientist. Especially, it is very important, very essential for pharmaceutical scientists, those who are really interested to take their career in pharmaceutical science, in research. The data mining concept will help, because the moment if you do the data analytics and data mining in your hardcore, domain area towards your research problem, 85% of the your problems will be solved by only the literature search and understanding, and only you have to do only 15-20% of the to prove the kind of your hypothesis by experimentation. The hardcore scientist or hardcore researcher would prefer to do more and more literature-based research and collecting the data, archiving the data, then cleansing the data, and understanding the hidden patterns which is present in the data, that is called as data mining. So it's very important. And also the data mining is the process of finding anomalies. This is one of the very interesting thing. Whenever people get this is we used to call as statistically uncontrolled process. When you are making a one batch dissolution or one batch, the yield, whatever the response or critical quality attribute, which is behaving something very differently, you should not, delete that particular experiment from your, schedule. The thing is that you have to do appropriate root cause analysis, and you have to find why the anomalies, why the pattern, why the special effect, what is the reason for special effect, so that you can prevent. So the statistically controlled process, the extension is that getting the Six Sigma product. That means 3.6 products, defected products in 1 million of products when you are manufacturing. So that is what the concept of 21st century pharmaceutical quality. We will discuss in detail later and part of these things. So whenever you are getting anomalies, whenever you are getting outliers, whenever you are getting odd values, then it is very much you should be cognizant to understand why that particular thing is happened, so that you can prevent the failure. For example, in this instant, I will tell one example. For example, the civil aviation industry is running with the sigma of 10. That means if you take the Mumbai airport, in Mumbai airport every day maybe 500 to 800 flights are landing and take off, take on and take off. Suppose out of per year you can find more than 35,000 flights handled. If at all, if Mumbai airport is giving the 3 Sigma product, none of us we use flight for traveling, because the confidence they are giving, like 1 million landing, even 10 million landing, there is a one case of plane crash. So that is what now, if you see the pharma industry, we are running with the 2 Sigma approach. That is what FDA's thought process. That means every 100 batch we have the somewhere around close to 20-25 batch failures are something which is happening similar to that of out of trend or out of specification. So the very important thing here is that maybe in last 5 years, the cost of the quality, what cost probably to my understanding, pharmaceutical, big generic pharmaceutical companies in India, they spend more than somewhere around $6 billion to remediate their all the plants which got 483s. That is because of all these things. So we will, that means that there is a very good hard learning from that. So the data mining is very, very important for understanding the process. Next slide, please. So the big data analytics is nothing but you have analytical procedures. That means analytics procedures. You have a number of techniques are available, and you have a big data. You couple this big data and analytics, you will get the statistical decision making. It's a unbiased decision making. Generally, what happened? The concept of big data analytics came into the picture. Even in marketing, people always say, I'm a 25 years experience in this area, I know what to do. But the big data analytics say that even though you are having 25 years experience, you may be a great professor, you may have 500 publications, but give the evidence why I should take this decision. It's a more mature way of science. It is not relying on the person's independent capability, or the decision making is not based on the past record of the researcher. It is based on looking the present data what he generated. So this is what very important big data analytics in taking the business decisions. And in pharma, the business decisions are, very, it is very well gelled with the, the scientific data, scientific evidence, and so on. You might be knowing the Exuvera case when Pfizer launched the inhalation insulin. Many people told that it is not going to work, which is because of the glycosylated hemoglobin levels, which I mean to say, Exuvera produced is less than 1%, whereas metformin is somewhere around 2%. But still, people pursued, and in fact, Pfizer spent $800 million to develop standalone that product, and additionally $200 million for promoting and marketing that product. After spending $1 billion and closely, 10 to 15 years, they had no return on investment. It's okay for Pfizer because of, they have the good capabilities in terms of financial capabilities and technology capabilities. But whereas in Indian companies, such a failure may result very bad financial shape of the company. So the big data analytics is the decision making. This is the decision making, not believe the person's independent capability. It believes the statistical. It believes the data, how the data generated, and it looks all. We will discuss very important. In fact, the message I want to give it to you people: you don't believe the people while taking the decision. You see the data, whether it may be your M.Pharm or PhD, or you are doing some funded project. You take each and every step of your project. You take a research decision based on the statistical capability or statistical thinking, statistical decision making you have to take. Next slide, please. So this is what we are going to talk about, artificial intelligence, because people are not believing the great capabilities. Even today, if Einstein come, or even today, if Newton come, people ask number of data to prove their theories. And in fact, it is very important for pharma. We have a lot of failures. Probably we got failure with thalidomide. We have phenytoin failure. We have diethylene glycol strategies. So these failures resulted with different, like, pediatric nephrotoxicity and whatnot, Hydantoin tragedy, then thalidomide tragedy. So we are not interested to believe any individual stalwarts who are expert in that particular domain. We believe whoever may be, they are taking a, they are in research. They should produce the data. The data should speak the quality of the product rather than the who developed the product. So now the next step is that why we can rely human brain, or why not we can make kind of artificial intelligence. In fact, personally, many people believe, including me, the artificial intelligence is the supplementary to the human brain. None of your, the softwares and AIs, MIs, all these things cannot replace human mind, human brain, because the human neuronal network is, much bigger, much bigger scope than that of the artificial intelligence. But when I was trained under Michael told only one thing: the artificial intelligence will help you to trigger your thought process. That is very important. It is not about the machine will do by machine learning. The artificial intelligence coupled with machine learning will do something better. It is nothing but you have ML with you. You have the data science or whatever the domain expert you are, so that you can able to give much faster, easier, and whatnot. So the artificial intelligence is the branch of computational science, the emphasis development of intelligent machine. For example, I will tell one simple example. You use the design expert, you use the WinOnLink. These are all the, or you use Netcom Studio, you use Autodoc. These are all the kind of artificial intelligent outcome. Even without artificial intelligent software, without a big thing, you can do it. But when you want to do, for example, I remember when we started IVIVC doing a two compartmental method using Lou Riegelman method, it takes somewhere around 1 week to deconvolute for 20-25 subjects individually. But whereas today I'm having the power of computation wherein I can run somewhere around 1 lakh simulations per day. That is what the artificial intelligence will help you to speed up your process. This is something very simple. You can able to multiply by your own, or you can use calculator, or you can use Excel spreadsheet. That is depends upon your requirement. But the basic fundamental knowledge remains same. Next slide, please. So this is what generally very I mean to say very interesting. Previously, people go by the. In fact, many years before, they thought that the therapeutic discovery itself an accident, whether it may be a penicillin, whether it may be a imipenem, or whatever it may be. Very few molecules got a blockbuster status in pharma market, which are carefully synthesized with the appropriate optimization and design based techniques. But whereas most of the blockbuster molecules, for example, instant even ranitidine is not for antihistaminic activity. Even chlorpromazine is not invented for antipsychiatry. In fact, penicillin, everybody, it's a discovery. But in artificial intelligence, what we are doing, we have a compound. No need to synthesize compound. No need. You have to have a in silico or a structural based program. You can make it number of possibilities. You have number of the tools, in silico tools are available to make the number of compounds. So once if you get the basket of 1,500 compounds, then you can do the high throughput screening. I mean to say, using a parallel artificial membrane, maybe using like a lung fluid retention or blood-brain barrier permeation, or whatever it may be, the renal toxicity, what you want, whatever you want to, you can do it. Like whether maybe an expression of multi-drug resistant gene, or maybe the P-glycoprotein efflux, whatnot. You can do everything by in silico. The number of in silico tools are there. You can screen that. Then from that screening of in silico, it has two pillars. One is the structural activity properties, which will give the to the safety and efficacy of the product by establishing the cardiovascular pharmacology, general pharmacology, respiratory pharmacology, and so on. And also it gives the efficacy in terms of receptor binding affinity, reduction in blood pressure, or therapeutic outcome, or pharmacodynamic effect, whatever it may be. So you can establish the safety and efficacy completely using the in silico method. Then this is using the structural activity relationship based algorithms and in silico techniques which are available. And in other side, you can have a structural property relationship wherein you can establish the toxicokinetics, drug accumulation, and tissue distribution, tissue pharmacokinetics, fasting, fed, rhesus monkeys, mini pig. You can do translation research and everything. So before the molecule come into the wet lab, that means synthesizing that particular compound physically, you have plenty of data with you about that particular molecule and how it behaves in different preclinical animal species, different clinical animal species, different in vitro cell lines, and so on. You have a, the melting point, molecular weight, solubility profile, what is the impact of bile. So everything is possible. That is what I mean to say. The structural activity relationship and structural property relationship will give the complete understanding. So what is the benefit of this particular approach is that, for example, I think, if I'm not wrong, in 2005, one of the peptide molecule was introduced for the treatment of some of the oncology. I think TN1459 is the molecule wherein people got the multiple failures. That means multiple organ failure, and somewhere it's a phase 1 study. In fact, many people lost their life. That means somewhere around 12 people were participating, and 4 or 5 deaths were happened. This allowed once again the use of the data-based approach. For example, they come up with the MABEL, maximum allowable biological effect dose needs to be calculated. Previously, we have a NOEL, then LD50, ED50, EC50. All those things came into the from the data analytics perspective. So this is the hardcore artificial intelligence wherein you can have a thing. Next slide, please. Machine learning. So machine learning is the application of artificial intelligence that provides the ability to automatically run the thing. This is what we discussed. Next slide, please. This is the biological. This is what the machine learning work like. How to, for example, if you have an appropriate program which is integrated with the number of things. For example, structural activity and structural property relationship. Then subsequently for a cell-based, that is called as modeling of individual cells. Then subsequently modeling of tissue, then modeling of the organ, then modeling of the species, whether it's a preclinical species or human, or a different the demographics such as age, sex, and race, and different, I mean, to special population like lactating mother, pregnancy, because the pregnancy, the pharmacokinetics is very different because of the different fluid volume and so on. And the congestive cardiac failure, diabetes, and polypharmacy, multiple drug administration, everything you can make it into the, you can able to see the proficiency of thing we can able to do through machine learning. Probably this is what my thought process. This may happen or not, I don't know. Probably after 15 years down the line, we can see the prescription generating artificial intelligence, or a kind of in silico tool. You put your all laboratory, biochemical, pathology, all data into that algorithm. It will generate its own prescription, so that there is no need of doctors. This may come in future. We will see how it is going to progress. Next slide, please. So all these things of the right from the data analytics, the big data, whatever it may be, the basis of all these things is that primarily the domain knowledge. In addition to the domain knowledge, you require a very good statistical understanding of that particular thing. So statistics is something very not very difficult. Statistics is not something very different. Statistics is the group of it's a kind of I mean to say collecting, analyzing, presenting, and interpreting data. Why you have to collect, analyze, and present and interpret the data? What you are generating is to make the decision. When you want to make the decision, because many times the human brain is something very different, which results in biasness to the the people, biasness to the system, biasness to the project, so many bias. So the bias bias is everywhere. Bias is there in industry, in government, in academics. This biasness resulted with a lot of failures. We will see the number of failures which happen. So it's a structured approach to collect, analyze, present, and interpret the data, which is which will be useful for making a decision. The decision is very important. Unbiased decision we have to take, because we can use the statistics in either way for taking the decision. Next slide, please. This is one of the very interesting thing. For example, what many people are may not be interested with statistics, but generally the thing is that one point of time, everybody know atorvastatin is the blockbuster molecule which given the revenue of more than $13 billion. The peak sales of the total sales of $13 billion is not easy joke. That means it's a very big amount. So what statistics is making, it is collecting the sales of atorvastatin, especially branded formulation from 1997 to 2011, from different geographies, different business units, different parts. So they are accumulating, keep on, and to make the statistical decision in Pfizer's history, atorvastatin is a blockbuster molecule. What is the evidence for that? The peak sales of atorvastatin for the year 2006 is $13 billion. None of the drug even touched, probably clopidogrel touched somewhere around $4.5 billion. Probably this is the last drug which is a chemical entity for blockbuster molecule. After that, we have MAPS, monoclonal antibodies, and some of the new biological entities. It got the status of blockbuster. But the last molecule which got the blockbuster status in new chemical entity, that means in small molecule segment, is atorvastatin. This is what the statistics will simplify your data, and it will give you a handful of information which will be very useful and very easy to handle. That is what very important. Next slide, please. Suppose when we see the great business decisions, which are very, very important for any company, even in a personal level, you have to take a great decision if you want to be a great man. If that is very as simple as like that. These are all the 5 great decisions. I like the decision out of all these things is the decision of my choice is Apple board decided to bring back Steve Jobs. That is one of the amazing decision, because the decision made the Apple the way they were running before Steve. In fact, if you see the history of Apple, Steve was badly treated and he was kicked out from the Apple. But after 5 years down the line, they realized that because of the Steve, the company is running. So they taken back. For this, they hired a consulting company. The company done the complete due diligence, and they told that a single unbiased management of Steve Jobs is the company's assets. This is one of the great business decision which I like personally. But whereas if you see the Henry Ford decision is a century-old decision, in fact more than that, everybody started squeezing from the employees and they are reducing their wages. But the first person, Henry Ford, thought of that if we increase the wage, if we increase the salary double, the workers' productivity will become double. That is what he realized, and he achieved some extent in that. So these are all the great decisions. All these great decisions, for example, whether GE's decision or Samsung decision, Samsung is now totally, if you see, it's a third company in terms of revenue. So all the decisions are basically based on the statistical approach. It's unbiased, non-human interventions are required sometimes to take a very tough business decisions. Next slide, please. The most bad decision is from General Motors. Many people know because in 1950s and 60s, the joint families become nuclear families, and the car people are General Motors is making a big cars with big then. Uh, but the point of time is that everybody want to they have their own car today. We are talking about personal computers like that. In 1970s, every American want to have a personal car. But this market dynamics, General Motors, somehow failed to capture this particular, I mean to say, business scenario. That is the reason General Motors went bankrupt 2009. You see, one point of time in 1950s election, General Motors decided who is the president of America. The story of today, even if you do some mistake, probably 5 years, that is very important. Then the next bad decision, everybody know Motorola. Although Motorola is the innovator of the, I mean to say, mobile phones, probably they lost their understanding to make how to make the customer happy. Next slide, please. So basically this is a very simple thing. Broad spectrum of statistics, you know very well. Descriptive statistics, it is nothing but an organizing the data. Yes, we discussed the data come from different formats. Different formats, maybe it is a pictorial. Nowadays there is number of beautiful tools are available. If you have a picture with you, you can convert it into the numerical data using the ggplot like kind of software which are available. But in those days it is not, it's very difficult. We used to have a log paper, taking the printout in log paper and graph paper and getting into the conversion. But today number of softwares are there. So descriptive statistics is majorly organizing the data in which will be helpful for decision making. So obviously the inferential statistics is the part of statistical decision making. Next slide, please. So these are all the functions. These are all simple textbook you people might be knowing. Descriptive statistics is nothing but graphical, numerical, and relationship. Whereas inferential statistics, confidence interval, errors, and comparison, probably 2 sample, 3 sample, t-test, z-test, t-distribution means n is equal to less than 30. The basic flow, I will put it in a single line theory, which I generally used to say. Whenever the data comes, first you should understand the data and you should stack the data. When you stack the data, then you have to go for normality test. There are number of techniques are available to find out the normality testing. The one of the beautiful technique is Anderson-Darling test technique. When you use Anderson-Darling technique, you can find out the data is not normal or non-normal. If the data is normal, that means it is going for Gaussian distribution, wherein you can able to find out the exact confidence interval because it shows that the absence of skewness. Data is either positively or negatively skewed. So that is one portion. Suppose if the data is not non-normal data, then you have two approaches. You can use a median based approach rather than mean. You can go with the median based approach. For example, Wilcox-Mann-Whitney test is similar to that of paired t-test or unpaired t-test. Then you can go for non-parametric statistical techniques, including Wilcox-Mann-Whitney test, which is frequently used in pharma. That is something very different. Then your median-based approach, then keep on. The other thing is that what generally we do in BA/BE studies, if the data is not normal, we can make transformation. One of the thing is log transformation. Then you can do square root of transformation, least square transformation. The number of transformations are available. The moment if you transfer the data inappropriately, the normal distribution you can get a log normal distribution. That means once if you make it logarithmic scale, log normal distribution. Then once again you can apply parametric testing like t-test, ANOVA. That means t-test, the t distribution, it follows the z distribution, and you can get. Generally, the sample size is less than 30. You have to choose t distribution. When sample size approach 30, t distribution equal to z distribution. That means one standard deviation variation. Then if you have two variables, then you can use two-way ANOVA. You have multiple variables, you can use designing of experiment, wherein you can develop the model when to build the relationship between the response and variables. If the single response probably linear, log linear, or parabolic, or Bayesian. In case of you are having a multiple variables, if you want to know the interaction, then you can go for either Takuchi approach or designing of experiment. This is what about the simply statistics. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, now probably we understand what is the statistics and what is the statistical decision making, big data analytics and all. Now I'll come back to our hardcore pharma. Pharmaceutical products has three pillars. Probably you people know very well: safety, efficacy, and product quality. Safety is related to the moment you take the medication, you should have a less number of adverse drug reaction. It should be devoid of ADR, but virtually there is no drug exist in the universe without side effects. That means we have to use carefully. We have to titrate safety versus efficacy, risk versus benefit. So when the way the products are being manufactured in terms of robustness, ruggedness, reproducibility, within the batch variability, between the batch variability comes under the quality. It's a part of CGMP. So the very interesting thing that is conventional tools like assay, disintegration, dissolution, like impurities, particle size, so on. It depends upon the drug substances, drug product, and biological substances. Suppose if you are going for developing some monoclonal antibody, then there are a number of parameters like host cell derived protein, host cell derived virus, number of oligomer content, protein content, as a number of parameters are there. But this was very interesting till 2000 people were thinking about only manufacturing quality. If the product quality is only related to manufacturing quality, so the manufacturing quality is strictly governed by the CGMP procedures. Whether it may be a branded companies or generic companies, whether it's the international market or domestic market, generally people do only one time clinical trials, whether it may be phase 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, probably not for to make the scientific evidence. When you come back to the generic product, people do only one batch bioequivalence study with the branded formulation, either fasting or fed or both fasting and fed. That depends upon the regulatory requirement. Here the thing is that I am making only one batch. For example, if it is a branded formulation, they are taking only one batch, clinical trial batch. Then they are establishing the equivalency between the clinical trial batch and to be marketed batch. That means the batch which they are proposed to manufacture for large scale for this. So here number of parameters are there. For example, scale dependency, dimensionless model, scaling up. Then they make some CB0, CB30 filing to make some tweaking, because generally the smaller number of small size batch they used to take for regulatory submission, whereas the commercial manufacturing is much bigger, sometimes 20 times bigger. So this was a, it's a known gap in pharma since 1984 when the Hatch-Waxman got approved. That means Hatch-Waxman Act. That means the generic, the concept of Orange Book came for generic product approval. So almost 16, 17 years, FDA is titrating in US and the European Medical Agency is titrating in Europe. I don't know much about in Indian scenario what they are doing. But then one point of time, what actually happened after 20 years of the time, they realized that what we are doing is something very different. We are taking one batch. So the manufacturing centric pharmaceutical quality is shifted to patient centric pharmaceutical quality. That is what the concept of data analytics, biopharmaceutics, in silico methods, everything into came picture, like in fact continuous manufacturing, batch rejections, all these things into picture. So next slide, please. So ideally, what is happening here is the batches are developed in research and development stage, which has certain critical quality attributes and material attribute, process attributes. It is very easy to control. It is very easy to control in R&D stage, but whereas in manufacturing stage, it is extremely very difficult because of number of even pharma companies. In fact, pharma manufacturing is one of the most influenced manufacturing where the less automation. Even today, we don't have the robotic arms to dispense the thing. It is things are happening. So I like this tool, QBD. This is what the patient-centric, patient is in the center. Then you have a mechanistic understanding of different thought process, whether it may be in vitro, in vivo, and all those things, understanding and developing a design space full products. Next slide, please. In development stage, what actually it is happening is that you have a influencing, you have a critical attribute, you have a reliable and reproducible method for characterizing the attribute, which should reflect the in vivo, whether it may be a particle size, whether it may be a package, whatever it may be, it should have some in vivo relevance. Whereas, next slide, please. In case of manufacturing and life cycle management, it is very important. You have to standardize, well characterize, and very simple method you have to make. Once if you have this in vivo critical quality attribute, that means they have parameters, variables, and you have the best optimal deduction. That means whether it may be analytical technique or maybe a non-analytical technique, then you can link your entire manufacturing quality towards to the patient centric. Now here very important here is this is for one of the in vivo attribute, whether it may be a Cmax, onset, elimination. There are number of parameters in vivo. There are number of parameters in quality attribute wherein the DOE comes place and it generates huge number of data. That comes big data analytics. Then you have to go for data mining to find out the thing. Next slide, please. So I'm more talking about the pharmaceutical quality in terms of generic perspective today. The structural property relationship, once if you got the molecule or the project identified by your business development, when the project name is given, you should not go and rush to take the batches, never. Just to understand the structural property relationship of the drug substances and keep on accumulating the data related to the drug substances properties. Next slide, please. For example, these are all the some of the data like hydrogen bonding, polar surface area, lipophilicity, shape, metabolism, clearance, physicochemistry. You collect maximum number of data. Now I am talking about the in silico data. It is not a real-time data. Next slide, please. These are all the some of the in silico tools which are available to collect the data. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this is the case study wherein you want to predict the oral formulation, bioavailability, that means the plasma drug concentration time profile, wherein this side you have all the parameters you can put it and you can able to. Next slide, please. So this is the, you can do the whole modeling, whatever you want you can do. You want age, gender, I mean to say, you want structural property relationship in, yes, possible. You want solubility, it is possible. You want polymorphism, you are using the mixture of two polymorphism, two particle size, mixture of two APIs which are interfering. Whatever it is you are thinking, everything is possible in modeling just before beginning of your project. Next slide, please. In fact, many people are working in nanotechnology, especially nano pharmaceuticals, like making liposomal and I mean to say particulate system. Number of physiological based pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics models are available to understand your, before you are going to the rat model or rabbit model to find out the efficacy. You can able to translate into the preclinical in silico methods wherein you can able to identify the potency and drug concentration. If you know the drug concentration in the site of tissue, then you can able to develop your you know, whatever the tumor killing rate and so on. So this is the parameter sensitive analysis, one simple example how the solubility is influencing the Cmax. This is the one of the very good example. Next slide, please. Next slide. So these are all the in vitro tools are available. What is my concept here is that you can put every data modeling. For example, somebody asked me how we can put the optical microscopy data into the in silico methods. So if you have optical microscopy data, you will get the for example, if it is a microparticle and if your resolution is good, then you can get the you know, circle equivalent diameter. You get the morphology, you get the topology, everything is possible. Suppose if you have a chemical imaging of I mean to say liposomal product, then you will understand the differences, the distance between the bilayer, which is very important. The distance between the lipid bilayer is very important for diffusion of the drug, especially the hydrophilic drug like bupivacaine, wherein your lamellarity will play an important role in pharmacokinetics and subsequently pharmacodynamics. It is possible. So everything is possible. Next slide, please. So yeah, these are all the very simple conventional technique like pH, buffering strength, all these things you can able to model, because every tissue has its own buffering strength, then pH induced ionization, then ionization induced permeation, everything you can able to model. Next slide, please. Then there are some specialized techniques, use of alkalizers and you know, I mean to say physiologically relevant, especially when those who are working in SMEDS, SMEDS based nanoparticulate system. Then you have to model for bile lecithin system and the formation of mixed micelles and which subsequently lymphatic uptake. Everything is possible to model. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. For example, in vivo tools, this is what we are talking about, in vitro tools. In vivo tools means you will get from the phase 0 data. This phase 0 data is very important when you are doing a micro dosing. microdosing, probably you have a linearity in your pharmacokinetics, then you can able to find the precisely what is the elimination rate constant and distribution rate constant, not even with the plasma drug concentration time profile, and also you can able to get it from the the radioactivity distribution of the radioactivity when the deuterated compound is given to in the form of microdosing. Especially when you are developing a generic product, this will be very, very useful. Then phase 1, phase 2, phase 1 study, you will get the very good pharmacokinetics in different route of administration. In phase 2A, you will get in the disease impact on the pharmacokinetics and the exploration. Phase 2B, you will get some kind of PK/PD relationship. So everything is possible. Next slide, please. Then this is something like IV/IVC. You people know that it's a mathematical relationship between in vitro and in vivo. These are all the in vitro parameters like dissolution, drug release, particle size. In vivo parameters like Cmax, AUC, etc. Next slide, please. So this is the flow chart which I am leaving as such for your understanding, which I am not going to detail. These are all the flow chart for IV/IVC model development. Next slide, please. Then you can make a very good correlation. Nowadays, the FDA is asking for IV/IVC for most of the product, whether you are generic or branded formulation. Especially this is very helpful for when you are going with the SUPAC level 1, level 2, level 3 changes, where you want to change the manufacturing site or API particle size, or some extent if you want to change the API vendor, you can able to file your product without bio studies using this thing. And IV/IVC, next slide, please. Yes, on today, the IV/IVC, the one of the very good in vitro parameter which can be hooked into the IV/IVC is dissolution tools. Next slide. Next slide, please. So these are all the different models are there. But what I prefer to do, especially I recommend to you people, is that unless otherwise you want to elucidate the mechanism of drug release, you can choose any one of these model. Otherwise, you have to go for double viable or triple viable model, whichever the best fitting model. Next slide, please. Next slide. Sorry, here. These are all the pharmacokinetic models, but presently nobody is using one compartment or two compartment model. Most of the time we are using the PBPK model or POP-PK model because of the residual errors. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is one of the things which I love to have this slide. Whenever you are developing a PBPK model for any of the formulations, whether it may be a intravenous or nano or simple control release formulations, the first thing is that you have to have a very good basic PBPK model using the intravenous route. Especially you have to find out SAD, MAD, etc. That means the single ascending dose, multiple ascending dose, switch over to fasting and fed, which will give the more clarity about how the molecule is handled in the body and what is the influence. That means the property what you get it into the biological system is the mixture of your drug substances property and drug product property, and you have to elucidate which is from your drug substances, which is your from drug product. Which is the predominant one. All those things you have to make it. Then you can embed the gene. For example, I prefer to have a RT-PCR, which is the technique which we can use we can load the genomic data. Then once if you put the genomic data in your PBPK, then you can go for special population, different races, and so on. So this is the basic fundamental slide. Somebody want to do that. Next slide is how the drug is handled in body. This, for example, any drug, if you want, you should have this kind of data with you. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this is what the flow chart, how to develop the model. And this is the deconvolution procedures. Different deconvolution procedures are available. Next slide. Next slide. This is one of the very interesting case study. Considering the time, if you nowadays, what I mean to say is that you have to have your clinical QTPP. Many people develop the synthesize the QTPP. That means quality target product profile in terms of assay, RS, DISO, impurity, so on. But what you can do is that you can develop a clinically relevant QTPP. My steady state Cmin should be like this. My Cmax is like this. I mean to say my effective AUC is like that. So you can make it number of scenarios. Next slide, please. This is for the biodiscriminatory method. Post approval changes, you can give the lower specification limit and upper specification limit with using your dissolution method. And generally, next slide, please. Next slide. So before to summarize this, I would like to tell one very interesting thing. People somewhere around 20 years before, people see the mean value. For example, you have the formulation A, you have the formulation B. They see the mean value between formulation A and B. Then after that, they started searching mean, median, mode. Then they started thinking about lower confidence interval and upper confidence interval. Then they come up with bootstrapped mean. Then they come up with bias corrected mean. Then they started using bootstrapped bias corrected mean. Now the trend is more mechanistic, more realistic. That means how many patients getting benefited from your dosage form or drug doesn't matter. What it is important is when the dosage form is given, how many of the people are not really getting the effect. That is very important for any drug discovery and development program today. So in summary, the data science is emerging in pharmaceutical industry. We have already underutilized the data science and computational techniques, and this is the right time. But the thing is that first you should become a domain expert, then you think about the statistical decision making and so on. That means you should have a perfect blend of both domain expert and as plus data science. In addition to that, you should have some interdisciplinary approach to understand the complexities. And thank you very much for providing me opportunity. If you have any questions, you can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for that crisp, very informative session on data analytics and how we can apply that in research and manufacturing. Now I ask the participants, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand or type it in the query box. Dr. Sagar will be taking the questions. Over to you, Dr. Sagar.
Hello, sir. It was an excellent talk on data analytics. However, I see some questions. So the first one is from Dr. Suresh Sormare. He's asking why every pharma industry is not accepting data analytics in formulation R&D.
Sorry, I don't want to comment on this thing. But generally what happened, data reveals who you are. In fact, this is not for pharmaceutical industry. Even if you go to the big universities, big professors are not really interested to reveal the data. Why?
Correct.
I'm asking Dr. Suresh.
Hello.
So you are asking about the industries are not opening up. I'm agreeing that many of the industries, in fact, now it is picking up. Probably maybe down the line from now 10-15 years, we will be in very good. That means, but why this is not happening in academics?
Actually, I don't know, sir. I just previously, in previous year, I have completed DM Pharma.
Okay, no, we are understanding it is not happening because a lot of the business is something very different from research. That is something very different. But in academics also it is not happening. If you go and ask Even two in the same institute, two professors are not sharing. So that is
Yes.
problem is there. Yeah. Aji, next question.
If there are any more questions, participants can raise their hands and ask the questions.
Okay, I just quickly take in. I'm requesting you participants, if you feel after this session data analytics has applications in the research and manufacturing, please type yes in the chat box. So we know how much of you are really convinced with regards to application of data analytics in research and in manufacturing. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. Sagar sir will be moderating it.
There is one more question from Ashish Kulkarni.
Okay.
How can we use data analytics for alternate API vendor manufacturing, as you mentioned in your presentation?
Yeah, it's a very good question. For example, if you have probably the generic companies, they develop with the two different APIs. Okay, two different API vendor. Here, the API vendor change generally they not prefer once if they start with the commercial manufacturing. But nowadays, the pressure of pricing pressure is impacting the generic products as well, especially in US. So it's a very good question. To answer this question, what you have to do is that you might be having some 50-60 batches at least before going to commercial. You might be having vendor 1 and vendor 2. You can stack all the informations from particle size to isomers, impurities, assay, moisture content, microbial load, everything you stack. You can use either Minitab. Minitab is the very good thing. Minitab, and you can use some extent JMP. These are all the two softwares. Probably you might be having the software with you. So you stack and you perform first you make the visual. That means you make the descriptive statistics report, which will show only the bar chart, diagram, pie diagram, how, and then you filter the critical quality attributes. Suppose if it's a BCS class 2 drug, particle size is very important. And you find out the variability analysis. Then you do all the exercise, then you will come to know based on your need which API is better. One is here we never prefer better, because something we are preferring better, then probably to minimize the impurity levels or moisture contents or microbial load. Generally, we should have the equivalency with the API which we have filed with the product and we want to make the product. So yeah, number of, like you can use t-test or ANOVA. If you have multiple variabilities, you can go for ANCOVA, and you can able. But this is once again, many people are already starting there, even alternative doing. But in India, very few companies are started doing this, and probably this market will pick up. I mean to say, people will pick up to use all these analytical tool. In fact, I'll put it in this way: there is no concept of R&D data analytics in past. At least to the best of my knowledge, now most of the big pharma, I mean to say big pharma means big generic pharma, are started doing R&D data analytics. Manufacturing data analytics, people started when 2004 the Lachman consultancy came in India, and they had tie up with some of the, I mean to say, some of the generic pharmaceutical companies. Then they started using Minitab, and JMP, then some of them, they have Primitra, number of Oracle based programs are available to think that. That means to do that. Basically, the process engineering group in big pharma, they do all these activities. And now it is getting modernized with the new softwares, new techniques and all. It is very much possible. It's very interesting question. Next, please.
Sir, the next question is from Girish. He is saying if you can guide on what all goes in developing a in silico model from scratch, like what all softwares, languages, and what all data is required to translate a natural process, and finally validation of this in silico tools.
Okay, in which context? He want to in drug discovery chemistry or?
Yes. I think this is in terms of drug discovery.
Drug discovery, probably I am not the right person. But you have like Autodoc and number of tools are available. But if you want drug discovery with respect to biopharmaceutics, I can tell that, for example, you have a number of tools what I have mentioned. Then you can able to probably crack. That means if you want, there are two parts in drug discovery. One is pharmacodynamics and receptor affinities and all those things. And the second one is pharmacokinetics. See, I will put it in this way. Any in silico tool, before you are clicking the button, you should know why you are clicking, what is the algorithm behind that. For instance, if you want to calculate the solubility, then you can able to do but by many ways. One of the way is calculating solubility based on the melting point associated enthalpy and entropy and free energy. So enthalpy, entropy and free energy, you can able to calculate the solubility. From solubility, you can extend to bile solubility. From bile solubility, you can extend to the intestinal duodenal solubility. From intestinal duodenal solubility, you can extend to the amount of the drug which is reaches to the systemic circulation. Once if you know the amount of the drug which reaches to the systemic circulation, then you can able to find out what amount of the drug which reaches to the targeted organ. That is probably the blood flow to the organ and the concentration of the drug present in the organ. That means called as Q, quantity which flow in that. Then wherein you can develop the PD models. So I mean to say, when you start from the basics. For example, if somebody want to do very good in drug discovery research, especially in pharmacodynamics, there is a gentleman called as Alex Avidiff. He has published a number of books which are very quite interesting for modeling and simulation. Yeah.
I hope that answered Girish's question. Yes, sir. Then next, and I think the last question is from Snehal. Can we apply these in silico tools to herbal or Ayurvedic products? And which particular program can be used for that?
It is extremely very good question. I am very happy the questions are coming from a different thought process. See, the problem with the herbal drugs, certainly you can do for phytopharma. That means you have a phytochemical constituents and you have the impurity profiling. You can able to crystallize or amorphous that particular. That means I mean to say you have a chemical purity is more than 95%. You can able to do that even for herbal. But the herbal generally comes with a polychemical composite. In polychemical composite, and very rarely we crystallized form is given. Most of the time it is given in terms of extract, kind of semi-solids or solutions. It's possible. It is possible, but it involved a number of parameters. In fact, I will put it in this way. The first time you extracted, for example, pepper, you take a simple pepper and ginger. You extract pepper and ginger first time, and second time you have the difference of extraction efficacy more than 5%. More than 5%. I am talking about minimum variance. But whereas in modeling and simulation techniques, maximum permissible percentage deviation is 15%. So only your input API itself causing 5% differences, bare minimum I am telling, then you will fail to validate the model. But whereas in you can do like Autodoc and in silico and all, you can able to do those things. I mean to say, in combinatorial chemistry drug discovery process, you can get it. In fact, there are also a number of problems are there. One such a problem is that that means nature, God designed the herbs. One is an active ingredient and another one is a permeation enhancer. Suppose if you isolate the pure active ingredient, it will not work, although it has the activity, because it should reach us to the systemic circulation, wherein the permeation enhancer is required. Because most of the alkaloids, secondary metabolites are extremely hydrophobic in nature. So because I believe the herbs are more potent than synthetic molecule. So the only problem comes the bioavailability. The bioavailability takes place in the fresh format, like what Indian system of medicine say. You have to take a decoction or something like that will work very nicely. But modeling those things, probably we should develop some very good tool. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. I think, yes, that was the last question, sir. I will hand over this session to Galvina, madam, for closing this session. Over to you, madam.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable time on behalf of Bombay.
Hello. Yeah, I think there is some technical issue on Galvina madam's end. So I would like to thank you, sir, on the behalf of Bombay College of Pharmacy for providing such a insightful session on data analytics. I hope the students have gained a lot of knowledge from your session, and I would like to thank you again for this wonderful session.
Yeah.
Sir, can we leave the meeting?
Sorry?
Can we leave the meeting now? Is it over?
Yes, yes. Who's that? Sumaya?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you can leave. Yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you.